Welcome to the BrettJohnson.biz podcast, where we discuss business on purpose, radically fresh leadership, capital that transforms society, and marketplace stories that embolden difference makers. Welcome to the Repurposing Business podcast. My name is Brett Johnson, and I'm here with Roger Gauthier, who gets pronounced many different ways, and depending on where you're from. Roger, welcome.
It's great to be here, Brett. I'm so excited.
So, Roger, we're going to talk about. We met actually fairly recently, but we're going to talk about what's going on in the world at the moment. Some of the possibilities around Web3 in the light of economic uncertainty, the changes that are happening in the world. And we live in an interesting time, Roger. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty. And at the same time, it could just be that God is placing technologies in the hands of believers. I'm not a big believer that technology is the answer to all sorts of things, but it can be an enabler. And so would love to just unpack some of the things that are out there with you. So thanks for coming on. And I'd like to start just by hearing a bit of your journey and your story. So you were born in Italy, from what I understand. Is that right?
That is correct. So I'm an Italian transplant. My dad was in the Coast Guard, was based out in Naples, Italy. And my mother's mother took a liking to my dad and orchestrated a setup so that my dad would get to see her and meet her daughter. And obviously they fell in love, and the story began. So
fantastic. So I would have thought Naples, Florida, but the genuine deal, Naples, Italy. That's fantastic. Yeah. And so you moved back to the States with your family at some point.
Yeah. So about 3 years of age, my dad got a job out of the military, became a pilot for Pan Am based in San Francisco. So we moved to the Bay Area and then spent a little time there. And then I think a couple of years later, moved up to Lake Tahoe, California, where I grew up in the mountains of the Sierras.
Well, you know, I could have been on one of your dad's flights. I took a Pan Am flight in 1986. When we came to the States, we went via Chile because we had friends in Chile, and our flight was quite a famous one. It was they reinstated flights from Chile up into San Francisco, and I came on Pan Am. And I remember I said to Lynn, the flight was delayed. And at some point, you know, we were there with a couple of kids. And I said to Lynn, I think we're flying around in circles. And she said, no, how do you know that? And then the next thing, I looked out the window and there was a Peruvian fighter jet flying next to the plane. Anyway, they suggested that Pan Am had violated Peruvian airspace. And so we had to go down and visit Peru. So that was my only visit to Peru for 5 or 6 hours on the runway on a Pan Am flight. So that was back in 1986. So I see you graduated from Palo Alto High School in 1985. Is that right?
Yeah, you've been doing some CIA investigative research there, Brett. So yeah, after Lake Tahoe, we moved back down to the Bay Area. I lived in Palo Alto and had to learn how to mesh with the city folk, since I was a mountain boy, and got a chance to tromp around Silicon Valley and the whole Bay Area there for a stint. And then I darted off to University of Colorado in Boulder, where I studied physics and aerospace engineering, of all things. So
fantastic.
So in a way, I kind of am a rocket scientist, but not quite, I guess.
There we go. Well, that's great. Well, fascinating background. So let's fast forward. We were at a Christians and Web3 conference, and you were the moderator for the session that I was working on. So we got to connect a bit over there. How did you get involved with that conference, and just your impressions of Christians and the Web3 space?
Yeah. So Brett, it's interesting how, the scripture says man plans his ways, but God directs his steps. And I certainly had no no forethought that I was going to be involved in Web3 and the crypto space and NFTs. And a dear friend of mine who is a apostolic, prophetic business coach and pastor, launched the very first literary work from outer space called The Prophetic Matrix. And God had spoken to him and said, "You're going to launch a book from outer space." And he was thinking, is this some kind of revelation metaphor? And sure enough, he literally orchestrated an arrangement where he met someone at NASA, and they decided to do this project to launch it from space, and beamed it down to the colleges in college in Australia. We reconnected, and he had turned it into an NFT. And he was telling me, "Roger, I really want to get into the metaverse. I've just turned my ebook into an NFT, and I need help." And that started the journey. I knew he was somebody with a lot of wisdom and due diligence. And so I realized he's going to make his decision in working with me based on his confidence in my skill set. And knowing that I didn't know anything about NFTs or the metaverse or anything, I just said, "God, I need to know somebody that is well versed in NFTs." And literally the next day, he connected me with a gentleman by the name of Eric Skeldon with Kingdom Warriors NFT, who was also at that conference. And so we started working together, collaborating on a few uh, crypto NFT projects. And then what ended up transpiring was we produced a NFT bootcamp course for him, full-fledged white glove service, big house, rented, fully catered, 3 days, filming, the whole thing. And out of that, he was so delighted with how that was put together that Jason Flegel, who put on the Web3 conference, contacted me and said, "Hey, I heard you do events, and you're experienced that, because we also did events for Jim Rohn as part of my journey." So he asked me to come on board and start helping in any way I possibly could. And and that's how I ended up at the Web3 conference, was trying to, as I like to say, follow the breadcrumb trails. God put someone in front of you, and you just do whatever God's leading you to do, or whatever is needed at that moment. So Jason said, "Hey, I need help I need some moderators." And so next thing I know, I'm blessed with getting to interview you, Brett, and hearing your thoughts on the whole topic.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you. Speaking of following the breadcrumbs, that seems to be pretty much where we are with this whole Web3 thing. Just to go back to the Bay Area, in 1995, we hosted a conference, Christians and the Internet, and we had about 18 speakers just one day. People just spoke for little bits and pieces, and one of my friends was a chief technologist type, and he explained the internet, and people were trying to follow. So this was the early days, really, when we were just putting up static web pages and so forth. But people were already doing group worship via chat. It sounded very, very basic, and it was, but you could see, well, this was going to change the way that we could have an impact from a kingdom perspective. And then a while later, of course, with the Web2 stuff, although it wasn't called that much, we went through the whole .com thing, and there was more the interactivity and more the community side, and we saw the social media platforms coming on. But here we're at the beginning of a really, really big change, and still really at the beginning, with some different enabling technologies, things that enable you and I to own our own data. There's ways to monetize things through tokenomics or the NFTs that you mentioned. So, and we seem to be following the breadcrumbs pretty much. There's a whole bunch of these different things that are out there. We don't really know what we're going to end up with, but certainly it seems like one of those sea changes is taking place again.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating to see. I think, now this is just my personal opinion, I think we're on the verge of when Gutenberg invented the printing press, it revolutionized how we communicated and what we were able to do and rapidly disseminate information to the masses. And we're in that same type of transition, just even like from the the propeller plane to the jet engine, right? Totally
Yeah.
revolutionary concept of transportation. Now
Yeah.
being able to do things faster and farther, moving
Mm.
into this Web3 environment, and the whole blockchain decentralized, just this whole space, is going to be that type of transformation,
Yeah.
uh, transformational
Mm.
shift, in a way that,
Yeah.
we're just scratching the surface right now,
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
look at it and where it's going.
Yeah. So, Roger, you've done quite a bit in the personal growth space. You've worked with some big name players and so on. It seems to me that if we looked at the learning space first and foremost, particularly, there's been the pandemic, there's been openness, the increase of things like Zoom, like we're doing now, and so forth. But this could go to a whole new level in the Web3 space, the whole learning environment. And have you begun to see learning begin to change in the Web3 space?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that migrating over right now, in that, at least for us, what the steps we're taking, which we're really excited about, is, there's a way, in every community you have a community life cycle, right? They come in, they get excited, they participate for a while, they become seasoned, mature, and then they start to drop off, that kind of life cycle. And you see that in the education space. People will come in, they'll start learning, they get saturated with information and they drop off. And then secondly is that a lot of times in the information education space, there's a financial requirement that people
Yeah.
have to dish out. And so in this new environment, we're starting to use it in a way where we can actually pay people or to learn. So now instead of them paying us, we can pay them to learn, and it removes the barrier of price and finances in order to get involved. And so I
So
think that's gonna.
how does that work? Because, if I'm going to do an MBA, whether it's online or real, I have to pay up. I'm getting content, I'm getting all of that stuff. So how does the you paying them thing work?
Yeah, so again, we're experimenting with this model and looking at how we can do it. But one of the things inside the Web3 space, in particular the platform we're using right now, is you can tokenize behavior. So whatever it is, the behavior you're wanting to drive, whether it's you're wanting to have them go and invite people into the platform, they can get awarded a certain number of tokens to do that. If you want them to make a post, they can get a certain number of topics or tokens to do that. You can set it up where, hey, if you read this course or go through this course, we'll award you 7 or 10 tokens, whatever it is you want. So they're going to be tokenized. Then from that tokenized standpoint, they can take those tokens and they can convert them over to a cryptocurrency, and use it as they need. So in that functionality, we're looking at, okay, if they maybe there's a small monthly investment, $20 or whatever a month, that they're contributing to the pool, if you will, then we're looking at, okay, if we have investors come in, if investors can come in and increase the size of that pool, but as these people learn and grow and begin to be launched out into the marketplace with their new skill set, can we use a smart contract in this Web3 environment where 10% of their earnings, or 3 to 10%, we're trying to work out those numbers, come back into the community pool to fund the pool as a result of us helping them get out there and launch their product, their service, or whatever it is they're trying to bring to the marketplace. So that way we can continue to empower others as they're coming in. That's kind of the model we're looking at.
Yeah. So your investors are somewhat paying for the initial outflow, as it were. People are earning tokens. I presume they can use those tokens for further learning, or they can translate them into cash, and then you're getting on a pay it forward kind of model. When those people go out upskilled, you're getting some money coming back in.
Right. Exactly. That's what we're working on right now. So
yeah, very interesting. Yeah, because in the old world, in the Web 2.0 world, you don't own the data. Somebody else owns the data. And if you're getting something for free, you're actually giving up your privacy from an advertising perspective. And so they know everything about you. Your phones are listening to you and so on. And then you give up the privacy. It's not your data, and they make their money off the advertising. But this is different. This is a different world. Yeah. So learning is different. How about retail? Do you have any thoughts on how we're going to be shopping, buying, and selling in the Web3 space?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we're definitely pioneering in this space. If you recall, they had at that Web3 conference just the idea of being able to share your clothing with a button on your shirt, and someone scans the button because they like your shirt, and the next thing you know, they're buying the shirt. But then because of the way that the Web3 set up, it connects it back to you as the
Yeah.
original advertiser, and all of a sudden they're getting a commission, and they can do that to 4 generations.
Yeah.
We've got what is it, the Web3 gallery, where people creating NFTs or displaying electronically their work inside the store, and if someone likes that artwork, they can acquire and purchase it right there in the store from that digital frame. So I like I said, I think we're just scratching the surface of how this is going to be done. I was just in a conversation with a gentleman this week, or this last week, in regards to how the blockchain is going to completely overturn and uproot the traditional commerce marketplace. They're
Yeah.
in discussions with some pretty big players that are really interested in how can we use the blockchain and this whole Web3 space to literally eliminate storehouses. So, Amazon right now, you buy through Amazon and you have to acquire the products from storehouses throughout the world, that those products are there. But what if you could do it where you no longer need those things anymore?
Yeah.
And so you could wipe out a huge expenditure and facilities that are no longer needed. So like I said, we're just scratching the surface, I think, to see how this is going to transform. But I think
Yeah.
everything we've known, including marketing, we're so used to marketing the way it is, where you get bomb blasted with a message, and you don't know whether you can trust that person or not, or whether they're a reliable marketer or their products or services are good. But if you attach it to the blockchain and everything is trackable, now you know the truth about everybody. You don't have to guess and wonder whether the product works or not, the way it's going to be integrated with the Web3 and the blockchain and everything. So
Yeah. That's an interesting one. We'll come back to truth and control and transparency and so on in a little bit. But let's explore. So we talked a little bit about the education space, talked a bit about the retail space, and there are certainly, I know in the Middle East now, they're setting up full complete stores where you can see stuff electronically, basically you can purchase. And so it's like an online store with physical and virtual products. And I think there's a big study by IBM, and Gen Z, 70% wanted to shop in an actual store. I was very surprised by that versus just online. But they wanted to see in the store everything they could see online, which is physically impossible unless you get into the kind of space that we're talking about, using virtualization of products, if you like, or the digitization of products, which they then get that sense of both the physical and the availability. So that's quite interesting.
yeah. And there's 2 people we're working with right now that we're also at that conference, that are combining AI, AR, and just virtual reality, and bringing all of that technology into the computer, into your cell phone, and of course, you also met the creators of LifeVerse, trying what they're doing with Bible-based content, but now you can create an environment where not only can you see everything that you want to see in an environment virtually, but you can participate with it in some kind of way. There's a project that we're working right now where we're combining gaming along with virtual reality, so that you're no longer just surfing, you're actually a character in an environment where you can now go in and out of stores and see the different products and services that they're offering, even to the point where you can now book a travel experience in this virtual reality and then enjoy it at home on the days that you want to enjoy it, just like you would book a vacation. So it's going to be an exciting and interesting world, no doubt.
Yeah. So when people hear metaverse, for example, or augmented reality, virtual reality, and so on, it's quite often that we as believers can have a negative reaction to that stuff. We can say, oh yeah, well, it's Facebook, metaverse, Zuckerberg, and so on. But it's much, much bigger than Facebook and what Meta, as they're now called, are thinking about. And certainly, what sort of opportunities do you see for just the simple act of communicating the gospel, for example, in this new world?
Yeah. So, I think obviously metaverse, Facebook tried to coin that phrase. We're calling it the megaverse, right? It's much bigger. We could even call it the Omegaverse. Meta is just Facebook's branding of their little world, if you will. But from our perspective, this is this is where things are going. We can't stop it, so we might as well understand how it works, what's going on, and the different tools that are available, and then how can we create in this place an engaging, exciting, interesting way where people are still humans. They're still going to have interests and desires, and so that's always been, I think, the angle at which marketers look at is how can we create an advertisement that grabs someone's attention, keeps them engaged, so they make a buying decision. Same thing happens in regards to how we present the gospel. Can we present it by God's Spirit in a way that captures their mind, communicates the information, and then leads them to make a decision that improves their life? And so in this Web3 whole metaverse, megaverse, whatever you want to call it, environment, we have the opportunity to use tools in a way that have never before been able to be used, where we can communicate through all the different tools, augmented reality, virtual reality, AI, and create these exciting and engaging environments where we can communicate principles, ideas, truths in a way that we've never been able to do before. My middle son right now is engaged. He loves gaming, and he spends 2-3 hours a day in there. And I have been telling him, Joshua, you need to track your time, so that you can ask yourself, is this a worthy pursuit of my time? I just spent 5 hours today. So my thought was, if we could, since they're already there, what if we could create an environment where they spend that 5 hours learning principles of the scripture or the gospel, or engaging in a way that they walk away with something that they remember? We have the ability to do that now in this environment.
So if we go back to the Gutenberg press, so for the first time, you could just hear stuff audibly. Now you've got a printing press where you can get stuff out. Of course, stuff was written beforehand, but now you've got a mass printing press. Then, of course, we get things like, we end up with computers, we end up with emails. I still remember when my wife was doing business with a direct sales company, and the head office didn't have email, and everybody out in the field was saying, you have to get email because we're all talking to each other and you guys are out of the loop. And so, back in the days of AOL and dial-up and so on. So this is just really another step where instead of me seeing you just over here, I could see a hologram of you. I could see an augmented reality of you, which means when you've got a story to tell, it becomes that much more tangible and powerful as I listen to your story. And same thing with the, your megaverse type of thing. You don't just have to read about, Paul wrote a letter to the 7 churches. You can be there, you can move about the city, you can see what's going on, you could see maybe it as it was and as it is now and what's happening. And so there's ways of learning that just unlock the imagination in a big way.
No, there is. There was a powerful technology that was released in the early 90s, mid 90s, in which they found out, of course, we've probably all known this, but what they found out was if you could utilize a variety of modalities, you could really imprint the learning and retention of the subject matter. And what they had 3 screens three giant screens that the participant was looking at, and the professor was talking about just the sperm and egg ovulation concept, right? And so
Yeah.
on the main screen you saw the sperm going, and then all of a sudden it turned into the Star Trek Enterprise shooting photon torpedoes, which
Yeah.
then it merged back to this the sperm ovulating the egg. And now all of a sudden, the retention of the students, most of the students went up to almost about 97%, which is
Wow.
unheard of in education when you just typically try to read a book. So when you include visual and sound, and then you can include, smell and taste, the
Yeah.
retention is just tremendous. So in this Web3 space, we now have the ability to do that type of environment in this
Yeah.
whole megaverse where you can combine all the modalities as someone's participating. And I think we're going to see just astounding rates of retention and
Yeah.
interaction that we haven't seen before.
Which is really crucial as people's attention span has shrunk uh, over time and they're getting bombarded with things. So the truths are going to have to be presented in a more compelling way and in a way that can be interacted with and so on. So there's tremendous potential in all of these things, which is wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about a little bit about education. We haven't talked much about some of the other sectors, so government, healthcare, media, and so on, which probably takes us to this thing of truth. I've been thinking quite a bit, Roger, about like during the pandemic, there were some sectors of society that took a big hit in terms of their credibility. Big tech is one, media is another, big pharma or healthcare is another, and of course, government. What can Web3 type technologies do to increase truth-telling, transparency, visibility, accountability? Do you have any thoughts on that? And have you been thinking about that?
Yeah, it's I have been trying to, from a standpoint of, I mean, with the fact that first of all everything is transparent, so that's a big plus in regards to being able to prevent the corruption that we see, for example, in voting. Right? We
Yeah.
wonder, did by chance the election go one way or the other way? Right? There's no way to really tell because a lot of that information is not available to us. We have to rely on the media sources that are presently available to us and what we can find on the internet as well, which then makes it difficult because the internet is proliferated with viewpoints across all from both sides of the spectrum. So it
Yeah.
makes it very difficult to try to really wade through and identify what is the truth and what really happened. So when we
Mm.
put something like a Web3 blockchain type environment into voting, for example, we'll know the truth. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't hide that. So I think that's kind of exciting from that perspective. Um, I I don't. I think we're going to start seeing more and more of how this technology will enable us to ensure that what we're getting is the truth. I think the key here, in my perspective, is right now we have the opportunity as men and women of faith to take control, or I should say, to dominate a space, or as the Lord says, take dominion. We have the ability to take dominion in a space right now that is relatively new. I mean, it's here. It's been around for a little bit, but I think as we embrace and understand what it's doing and what it has the potential to do, we can be the leaders in this place, and so that we can now influence it in a way that can ensure that truth is definitely the value add, if you will.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but it's been very difficult, I think, as we moved into Web3. with the proliferation of voices from all types of angles to really sort through and discern what is the truth. But
Yeah.
with the technology that we have now, there is a way in which we could use this technology to ensure that what we're getting is the truth.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see how we're going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we see that a little bit going on with the DAOs now, those decentralized autonomous organizations working with
Right.
their nodes and their smart contracts. So, like I said, I don't know that I'm experienced enough to see the full potential of it, but I do see that it's coming, and I'm excited that we can use
Yeah.
it in a way to bring a little bit more peace, because the scripture says, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. But with that truth comes peace, because it's
Yeah.
the truth. So
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a real opportunity in history for truth being out there. Of course, when Jesus came to the earth, there was truth on display. And but as history happens, both within the church and outside the church, truth gets obfuscated. It gets messed up, and then we have to kind of have a reset every now and then, whether it's the Reformation or it's something else. And we tend to go through these cycles when we're ready for a reset, and we seem to be at a great spot where there's a lot of problems in the world, and there are technologies that could potentially bring truth, make things more transparent, and make things more decentralized from the perspective of, what's the source of truth. So the source of truth becomes billions of people, not a centralized government perspective or educational or, healthcare perspective on a particular matter.
yeah, I mean, I've been trying to, just being transparent here, Brett. You've been looking at, some of the terms that we're throwing around in this environment right now, from, transparency, decentralization, and I'm starting to try to look deeper. Like, what does that really mean? What are we
Yeah.
really talking about here? Exactly how is one's data protected? And but when we see an environment, for example, right, decentralized, and that nobody can control it, that it moves us more towards being that autonomous, sovereign individual, where we can now have choice over how we want to live our lives and use our information. We can see the decentralization of finance giving us the ability to no longer be manipulated by higher powers that want to control the financial system and the
Yeah.
whole economic engine that is run with that type of control. So I'm seeing that we can, that this is almost bringing, not to get too spiritual, but I almost sense that this may very well be the solution that God wants to bring to humanity to free us from the insanity that we've been living in, this type of economic, educational, even physical slavery that we're going through as a result of the control that we're having to deal with. So knowing that this technology can free that up is really exciting.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. But going back to that truth thing, we can see how we can have fact-checking platforms that enable people to actually check information, right? I'm just excited about the whole thing and where it's going. I think if we use it with wisdom, no question.
Yeah. At the same time, if we look at the events of the last couple of weeks, Roger, and we look at the crash of Silicon Valley Bank as an example, you and I both lived in Silicon Valley for a while. So, there is economic uncertainty, and certainly some are of the view that governments will tout the central bank digital currencies as a way to overcome the uncertainty of the banks. And what that basically means, of course, is that, if you had, say, $500,000 in Silicon Valley Bank, only 250,000 would be guaranteed. You'd be out 250,000. So you'd be thinking, is there a smarter way to do this? Well, one way is to spread your money across multiple banks and keep it all at $249,000. But of course, the central banks will say, well, the other thing is you can bank with us instead of banking with XYZ local bank. And we will issue you a digital currency, which again is one of the tools, if you like, or the products of the Web3 space. So technically, the Web3 technologies can free you up, and at the same time, they can take away your independence in many respects, because when the currency is digital, it can be turned on and off by whoever's controlling it. Now, this is quite different from crypto, right? So in the world of crypto, it's decentralized, it's autonomous, it's permissionless in the sense that you don't have to ask anybody's permission to transfer from A to B. So if I send you money, I don't have to go and ask the Bank of Florida if I can do it. I can just do it. But when it comes to a central bank digital currency, we don't know what that would look like. Would it be benevolent or would it be controlling? And so it seems like some of these Web3 things are up for grabs in terms of how they're going to be implemented.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I have to agree, Brett. It's I think, I remember back when Barack Obama met with Mark Zuckerberg. I think they were just starting to scratch the surface and see where technology was heading. And I think mankind has always been under the control of somebody's thumb, if you will. Higher powers that be wanted to control humanity. I think they misinterpreted the scriptures, have dominion. And so, but when you look at what's happening right now and the excitement that's created around the decentralization of finance in a way with Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies, it's providing a tremendous amount of freedom. I'm actually dealing with a whole issue right now where we had received funds and we were raising money to help a woman and her brother in Canada that were going through some very difficult medical situations, and they needed money in order to get him out of the hospital. I think he was down in one of the Caribbean locations. I was trying to think if it was, anyways, they have a very bad medical system there. And they basically, if you go into the hospital, you're dead. And so she was trying to get money to get him out of the hospital because they wouldn't release him until they had the money. So I was using something like GoFundMe, and GoFundMe was giving me the runaround. I mean, we're still trying to get the money from GoFundMe out to this person. And it's been more than 3 months trying to jump through all the hoops that they wanted in order to send that money there. It was ridiculous. And so now with a simple transfer of Bitcoin or other crypto, we can quickly get those resources to them. And then with a Coinbase debit card, they can literally use it like in an ATM machine and all of a sudden have finances. We don't have to jump through any hoops and organizations that are wondering, are we a terrorist organization trying to put money somewhere? So there's a concern I can understand there, but I think the centralized banking system is scrambling, trying to figure out how can we keep this control. And I think, I think people are starting to become a little bit more savvy and aware as to what is going on. And while the government or other organizations may try to create a digital currency that they can control, obviously that's dangerous, because if they don't like your politics or your positioning or whatever, they can shut off your currency. But we've always seen society have another way of being able to continue on in life, whether it's barter or whatever, in order to keep things going. And now this is just my opinion. We may see some dark days ahead. Just like when Jesus died, it was dark, but he was gone for 3 days and then he came back and life abound. My sense is that there's so much infrastructure in place now that I don't know that a single centralized digital token is going to work anymore. I mean, I'm here in Florida, and right now Miami, they're starting to mine their own cryptocurrencies out of Miami. For the residents of Miami, they're going to allow them to mine their own cryptocurrencies. So that's exciting for the city of Miami in that they can now create an additional revenue source. They're taking, I think they'll allow you to do it, but they take, I think, 30%. It's kind of high taxes, if you will, on anybody that mines their currency there in Miami. So with that type of freedom, we're seeing that pop around everywhere. How are you going to go from that back to a controlled digital token that the government owns? I mean, I think Pandora has been let out of the box, if you will, and not sure they're going to be able to get it back in. And if they try, I think we're going to see a revolt of the people, if you will. Like, we've had enough. There's a gentleman that has a wonderful website. It's called gotchoices.org. And he really is, Kyle Bateman is his name. He's really bringing a new understanding to the value of different types of currency exchange, how, the evolvement of currency and where it's gone from. And he's talking about creating almost like a universal token in which, let's say you've got, Brett, 100,000 frequent flyer miles on United, and I've got $200 of Subway sandwiches, right? And I'm like, well, I don't need any more Subway sandwiches, but I really need some frequent flyer miles, so I can exchange my token or my Subway sandwiches for the universal token, and then the universal token I can go buy your United miles. So knowing that these things are coming like that, I don't know that. I think the government now has fallen behind, or these powers at be have fallen behind in trying to control something that's out of the box. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Could they illegalize and try to make it illegal? Sure, I think they could try, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with Peter Gamble, or I'm sorry, is it Peter Gamble? Yeah, Peter Gamble, who owns Thrive.org. He was part of the Gamble family. And in Thrive 1, they looked at what was happening in the world from the perspective of the powers that be and how they were trying to control the world. And so they were looking at all the different solutions that were going out there. In Thrive 2, they actually went to people that were no longer talking about it, but were actually doing and creating all kinds of new technologies and new solutions for the problems that we have here. There's a gentleman, I think in Nigeria, that has created an energy ability to literally create energy from the radio waves in the air. So no longer a centralized form of energy. So what I'm seeing is this mass exodus from control into all kinds of different ways of expressing the freedom that God has given us. And I sense that we're going to see that here in this space. And I could be wrong, but I sense that if they try to do it, they might be successful for a short window, but it won't last very long.
Yeah. It seems like there's just a huge creativity when it comes to ways in which to monetize unusual things in today's environment, which means that, one of the things that has concerned people of faith for years is, well, what happens in the end times? And you can't trade, you can't buy and sell unless you've got, the mark of the beast. And there's lots of speculation about what that is. But there's almost a fear that goes with it. At the same time, there's a plethora of technologies and possibilities right now that are workarounds to traditional buying and selling systems. And I'm very interested to see how that's going to evolve. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that, Roger.
Yeah. I think I've thought about this, Brett, is when I first started looking and researching and learning, especially when I came across the website Got Choices, and they were talking about, I think it's called My Chip ID. It's not about a personal chip. It's talking about this universal token. And I could see, at first my thought was, is this the mark of the beast kind of thing, right? And as my understanding of theology grew, and again, people are going to hold on to their perspectives of what they believe. and I'm not denying that. But as I started to grow and learn about the book of Revelation and this end time philosophy, one of the things that I've come to understand is that that book has been moved from its position of the end to somewhere about 2/3 of the way in. And for a while, it caused me to kind of like just think, well, I'm just going to hold on. Jesus is coming back. I'm going to hold on, and I'm going to try to endure this evil and everything so badly. And hopefully Jesus will come back before it gets too bad. But when it shifted in my mind and I understood that actually the end times doesn't come until Jesus has made all of his enemies his footstool.
Yeah.
Something shifted inside. I'm like, wait a minute, if that's the case, then that means we as believers need to rule and reign in love to bring God's solutions to the earth. And so when I looked at this universal chip thing and Web3 and all of that, what I saw was that this is not the mark of the beast. It may very well be the infrastructure needed for that to happen. But I think at this juncture, we have the opportunity to use this new wave of technology to usher in the goodness of God in all the areas of life, and the creativity and the freedom that he always intended us to walk in with him. That's how I see it right now. As long as we don't sit on our derrieres and do nothing and stick our head in the sand. But
Roger, if you were to give listeners some advice about resources they could look at, places they could go just to learn about some of these things that you've been thinking about and talking about, what websites or podcasts or books would you refer people to?
Well, it's interesting, Brett. Obviously, you met Jason Flegel with Forum 12 there at the Web3 conference. So Jason Flegel, I think the jasonflegel.com, he's really doing some breakthrough work in bringing people the understanding of what's going on with AI. If you go to the forum12.com website, there's some websites already there that are connected to start learning. There's the gotchoices.org that I just spoke about, that I think is a great resource to kind of get an idea of what's going on. And I know this sounds strange, but at least it's a start to get some knowledge. When you type in to Google or other browsers and you're looking for information, you really don't know. And I think all of us are trying to get up to speed on this, who's an authority, who's not an authority, what's true, what's not true. But oddly enough, I've been using Chat GPT to engage in a dialogue to just start getting familiar with the concepts and the ideas of what's going on, because I know that it can go out and already access all the data, a lot of the data that's out there. And obviously it's not perfect yet, but I'm trying to use the technologies that are present to get me up to speed. And so I think that is a great resource tool for a variety of reasons. One, it gets you familiar with AI and how it's working, right? And how to interact with it and gain some experience and understanding. I know Kingdom Warriors NFT, they've got a unique way of using the Web3 and NFTs to make change in the media, in the arts and entertainment space. So it's a great example to observe and see what they're doing. But I think just getting in there and going are great starts.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Because most of my education right now has come from either in the trenches working or doing a Google search and or a DuckDuckGo search, and now with Chat GPT of trying to get up, and then of course interacting with people like yourself, Brett. I think you've got some great wisdom and knowledge in your platforms, that your digital footprint that's out there, and engaging with what you're doing as well is probably one of the best places to go to. So
fantastic. Well, Roger, thank you so much. I know we've thrown around some buzzwords, but our audience would be familiar with them or able to look them up. And we seem to be at this pivotal time in history. And I know there are times when you can shrink back. Just this morning, I was reading about when the nation of Israel was exodusing out of Egypt. And we need to have a sense as to when the wind has changed, when the momentum has shifted. And things had gone from Moses being a nobody, while he was a prince who became an outcast, and then he became somebody again, went back and forth. But eventually the momentum trended towards Moses, away from Pharaoh. And as Christians, we can be so used to the struggle that as we get close to a victory, we back off. Mm-hmm. And there's times as we look at technologies like this, we can say, well, we'll wait and see. We'll wait 5 years. We'll wait 10 years. But society reinvents itself so quickly, and the church so slowly, the people of God so slowly. So, back in the late 1990s, society was reinventing itself every 18 months, and the church every 50 years. And now I suspect that the ratio is even worse. So this is a time for us to press in and at least understand what is artificial intelligence, what is virtual reality, augmented reality, what is the possibilities, what is blockchain, what are cryptocurrencies, what are alternatives, what about tokenomics, how do you, and with this, not just how do you make money and replace your 401k, but what are the opportunities for living in a relevant way, in a way that reaches people where they are, and sees truth triumph. I think, I like what you said, you'll know the truth will set you free. And we have these competing forces, one batch which wants to obfuscate or confuse or mangle the truth. And at the same time, we have the technologies to uncover the truth. And we see this happening on national stages right now. And so for us to step back and say, well, I'll wait for them to figure it out, is disingenuous. This is a time for us to at least get in and experiment, ask questions, and learn. And so thank you, Roger, for your insights and for
if you don't mind, I'll share a final comment for you, Brett. And I know this might sound kind of strange, but when you look at society, right, they always seem to push back and expect things a certain way. So, when Jesus showed up on the scene, he disrupted everything that you knew about life because he brought the truth, but they didn't want him at first, right? They rejected the idea. And so and we've seen that historically throughout our evolution, if you will, or our advancement of society. We've seen the rejection, and I think they say truth comes in three ways. First it's ridiculed, then it's violently, scorned, and then it's finally accepted. And so the movie Jesus Revolution just came out, and I was so touched by it. But when you look at it, right, what was it? There was life was a certain way, and God brings an answer. This guy, Lonnie Frisbee, a hippie, who God is doing mighty things through this culture of people, and the traditional society wasn't really ready to embrace it. And the one man, Chuck Smith, opens his heart, opens his home, and it just explodes across the world to where we're still experiencing the impact out of today. And Jesus said that in the last days, right, we would do what he did and more. So when we did the NFT boot camp for Eric Skeldon in July of last year, this was done by my co-producer was David Cranfill of Kingdom Flame Studios, and he was the pioneer to Christian streaming television into the internet. And one of the things that was interesting is, he filmed all kinds of big name speakers, but one of the things that was happening, Brett, is I'm in the back of the room and I'm starting to weep and cry. We're not even talking necessarily about God. We're talking about technology. And yet the Spirit of God is coming all over me. And David Cranfill's wife is crashed out on the back of the sofa. And I just thought she was asleep. But later she came out and she testified and she said, man, I was being knocked out under the power of the Holy Spirit. I couldn't do anything. She goes, now I finally see. I had all these dreams and all these ideas, and I thought maybe it wasn't going to happen. And now all of a sudden I can see how with technology that the dreams and visions that God has given me can now come to pass because of this technology. And so what I'm seeing is, and it might be strange, but this whole idea of Web3 and decentralization and DAOs and cryptos and all this may very well be the yuppie, impact in our society in a way, if we'll open our hearts and allow God to show us how he's using this new wineskin to bring his presence to people all across the globe in an instant, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about billions in minutes, not years and years, but literally like that. That's exciting. If we'll just open up our hearts and get to learn and see it, I think we're going to be amazed. And the goodness of God. I mean, I remember I was in Brazil and God spoke to me and said, "I am the greatest investor of all time. I don't want the highest ROI. I demand the highest ROI." And he went on to say, "I'm going to pull out all the stops to reveal my goodness to people all over the earth." And I really believe that we're going to see his goodness poured out all over the earth, starting with this technology and what it can do to bring the solutions and the answers and everything that humanity has been crying out for. I really believe that this is going to be the start of that.
So things like big problems in the world, like financial inclusion. There's many people who are they're excluded from financial systems. They're too complex for them. They're too expensive. This could be an answer for them. Within these things, there are answers for the people who are excluded from education that become free, people who don't have access to markets for their products. That could change. That's good news for the poor when something that you have in your hands can be given to somebody else and monetized. That there's an upliftment that can happen through education, through connecting with others. So I love it. These are enabling technologies that can radically change the platforms, the mindset, the wineskins, if you like, that would become good news for the poor. Yeah, if we think about it creatively and not just worry about the evils of technology. So that's fantastic. Roger, I love that perspective. Thank you so much for sharing that. And good to have you on the podcast today. So just a couple of different things. You mentioned forum12.com, Jason Flegel, that's FLEAGLE.com, and then gotchoices.org. And then any other materials, your website, if people want to get hold of you? You've got many of them, but what's the easiest?
Yeah, our primary entry point right now is advancingthekingdomsvision.com. So that's our main entry point into all the different things that we're doing. So, but yeah, it was an honor, Brett, to be here. I feel so underqualified, to be honest with you. I think we're all new pioneers in this space, and I'm standing amongst a giant here with you. You've been involved much longer than most of us. So, like I said, I'm truly humbled, but grateful to contribute some kind of a value to your audience. So, thank you.
Thank you, Roger. There's a saying in Afrikaans, "In die land van die blindes is die een oog koning," which means in the land of the blind, one eye is king. And I think there's many of us with one eye at the moment, is the way it feels. And so we need each other, collaborating with each other to get God's perspective on things. So thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate it.
You betcha, Brett. It was an honor.